Called African Queen. And Humphrey Bogart at one point has done something slightly untoward, and Katharine Hepburn tells him not to, and he says, well, it's nature. And she says, nature, Mr. Allnut, is what we were put in the world to rise above. That's sort of my message. Actually, I have two messages. One is that there is nothing in nature as such, intrinsically, that is good because it's natural. Of course, nature is full of good things, but not because it's natural. And the other is that it's a good thing that there is nothing in nature that is good just because it's natural. So let me try and explain this. You've probably been told when you were brought up that God is good. And of course, that's what the psychoanalysts called a reaction formation. That means that people discovered a long time ago how awful God really was, if God indeed controlled this world full of earthquakes, disease, animals chewing each other to death for 4 billion years, and so on. So they thought God is so evil that maybe if we're just extra nice and we sacrifice and we pretend to think he's nice, he will be a little less awful. And now that most of us have sort of got over God, the thing is, we have passed this on to nature. We assume that nature has to be good. After all, it's had 4 billion years to work on its perfection, and so it must have achieved perfection. But actually, I don't think that even you believe this. And here's why. One of the things that people who are passionate about nature like to do is to talk about endangered species and to say, look, these species are endangered, we must save them. Now, the thing is, there's nothing more natural than extinction. Biologists estimate that over 99.9% of all species that ever existed are extinct. So really, if we're helping species to go extinct, we're just being natural. And anyway, some species are beautiful, and we want to keep them. But other species, such as the smallpox virus, is almost certainly endangered because it survives only in a few labs around the world. But you're not that keen on preserving the smallpox virus. You're not that keen on preserving even the black flies and the mosquitoes that assault you in the summer in Ontario. So that's why I think that actually you must come to the conclusion that, after all, nature is not providence. Nature is not providence because, actually, there are several reasons for this. First of all, evolution is not about you. I know that's hard to believe because we always think that evolution was this process whereby nature, or perhaps even some people think God, brought about the wonderful thing that we are. But the fact is, when we talk about survival of the fittest, it doesn't mean us. We don't survive. The only thing that's fit and survives are our genes. And our genes really should be of no concern to us. Their goals, of course they don't have real goals, they don't have intentions, but what they're all about is not what you're all about, and you have no reason really to identify with your genes. In fact, they do all kinds of awful things that I don't have time to detail, which actually are not good for you. So it's not about you. It's also not about now. What I mean by that is that epoch in the history of the Earth in which most of our natural characteristics were determined by natural selection, that epoch was very different from the world we live in now. And so, insofar as we're interested in our nature, we can be quite sure that our nature is not actually all that well suited to the life that we lead now. Now, our capacity for adaptation has already been mentioned today, and I think it's important to notice that it's not actually about adaptation either. Adaptation, in some ways, is the opposite of evolution. Because if you're adapted, then you don't need to change. What are the most well-adapted species? Cockroaches. They'll survive a nuclear holocaust, I'm told. And they've been around since long before the dinosaurs, and they're still around. Now, that's an adapted species. We're not adapted, and it's good that we're not adapted because it allows us to adapt. That is to say, it allows us to create something new. So, if you like, that's the negative part. That's why nature in itself as such is not particularly good. So let's move to why it's good that nature is not good. And here I think there's something very interesting that psychologists and philosophers have been talking about for a few decades now. It's the idea that we have two tracks in our minds. We have two minds that work very differently. We have an intuitive mind that is very swift, that is very efficient, that takes care of most of the things that we have to take care of as mammals. And we have an analytic mind that derives from our capacity for speech. That analytic mind is slow, it's clumsy, it's definitely not good at working out the solutions of immediate practical problems like how to catch a ball or how to ride a bicycle, which is very difficult to do if you're just reading a book about it and getting instructions. However, the thing about the intuitive mind is that although it gets you through the day, it doesn't get you to the moon. It's the analytic mind that you need in order to do something new, something complex. The intuitive mind is no good at innovation. And that's a crucial fact. And it's a crucial fact that language gives us something totally new. Animals, of course, fight, and we sometimes fight. But when animals fight, they never fight because they have different values. They don't fight because they care about different things. They fight because they care about the same things over and over again. Who gets to mate? Who gets to feed? Who gets to survive? So, as animals, our fights are all about old values that always stay the same. But as talkers, we create new worlds. I think you've had a fantastic demonstration just a few minutes ago here of the power of language to change the way we see things. And of course, poetry is one of the ways in which it does that, but it's not the only one. The other way is through argument, it's through calculation, it's through mathematics, all of which actually are domains in which, unlike the intuitive, we can get a lot of help from computers. In the intuitive, it's not so clear that we can get computers to help us very much, because we don't really understand very well how it works, and we program computers only in ways that we understand ourselves, and we understand the way logic works, the way mathematics works, the way language works to some extent, and that's why we can program computers to solve those sorts of problems. So that's why language enables us to actually create new values by talking ourselves and each other into new values, into new ideals, into new possibilities. That, I think, is the crucial fact about what is natural to human beings. But then, I've been talking about nature without saying anything about what it really means. What is natural? What is natural to human beings? Well, it's natural to empathize with others, to help them, to care about people. Love, concern, all of this, that's natural. So is hating, killing, raping. Nothing more natural than rape. People often object to this because they say, how can you say that? How can you say that it's in our nature to rape? Of course it's in our nature to rape, for the simple reason, and that's one of these examples of how our genes are not interested in the same things as we are. But certainly if you get Genghis Khan raping 1,000 women and having 10,000 children, he's going to leave a lot of his genes behind. And therefore you can expect that there's going to be a lot more genes of that kind. And that's exactly why that's natural, but not good. And we have to choose between the ways in which we pick natural things that are good and set aside natural things that we think are not good. So how do we do that? Well, once again, we have to try and understand what nature, what that word actually means. And one way of thinking about nature is that it's just whatever actually happens. That's nature. But the other way of thinking about it, which I think is more congenial to people who work for environmentalism, who try to defend the planet against all the depredations of our fellow humans, is to think about nature as what would have been if only we hadn't. What we could rely on if we weren't there. Well, that's a bit incoherent, and I suppose it would be better to say what the planet could rely on if we weren't there. The trouble is that neither of these senses of nature are available to us if we want to be natural. Why? Well, because if it means the first, if it means whatever happens, then we can't fail to be natural. Computers, cars, planes, atom bombs, all of that are just natural products of us, these natural beings, just like honey is a natural product of bees. So there's no way we can fail to be natural. On the other hand, if by nature we mean what the planet would be like if our footprint were zero, well, that is impossible. It's too late for that. We're already there, and even if we were all to commit collective suicide for the sake of preserving the planet, it's too late. We've already screwed it up, as some people see it. I don't see it that way. I see it as just doing our thing, and doing our thing in perpetually novel ways. And I think that what you have to understand is that if you've been tempted to think that there is something good about nature just because it's nature, you've just been attending to the wrong issue. It's not because it's natural. As I've suggested, there's as much and more about nature that is horrible than that is good. We want to save the beautiful endangered species. We want to annihilate the bad ones. And that's exactly what we should do. We want beauty, and we should care about beauty. We also want diversity, including the diversity Leslie talked about of African vegetables, be they or be they not considered to be weeds. Because in that diversity, there is, as I'm sure you all know, an enormous amount of useful information about things that could be good for us. And it could be good for any other animals that we care about. But it shouldn't be because those animals or we are natural. It should just be because they're beautiful and because you care about them. So, beauty diversity and the utility of diversity, the usefulness of having a hugely diverse natural world around us from which we can pick interesting, beautiful, useful remedies, medicines, and drugs, recreational and otherwise. That's what we want to preserve, and that's what we should want to preserve. Now, I'm a philosopher, and philosophers tell some stories that they're particularly fond of. And in particular, there are two stories about boats that philosophers are fond of. One is called Neurath's boat, the other one called the Ship of Theseus. Neurath's boat is about this. It's the idea that we are in a boat at sea, and that the boat perpetually needs fixing, but that you have to fix it without ever taking it off the water. So it has to stay afloat while you're fixing it. Now, as it stays afloat and as you fix it one plank at a time, sooner or later you might have replaced every single plank in that boat. And that is the second story, the story of the Ship of Theseus, in which every plank, little by little, gets changed and gets fixed and replaced by another plank. And then the question philosophers ask, professors ask their students, is it the same ship or isn't it the same ship? And what if you take the old planks and build another ship? Now, is that the old ship, or is that the new ship, the old ship, or is the ship the same ship as the old ship or the new ship? That's how we work in philosophy. Our job is to confuse you. And I want to say, this is exactly how it ought to be. We are on that ship, and it gets more and more splendid as we fix it, thanks to the power of language. And if you're still not convinced, then I'm going to show you who you are. You're the lady in the black hat in this picture by Gardner Ray that came out in the New Yorker over 50 years ago, who is offered a drink in an airplane and who says, "No, thank you. I don't think nature intended us to drink while flying." If you reflect on the philosophy of this lady, you will realize that whenever you use nature as an argument, you're just like her, totally confused and hopelessly self-undermining. Thank you.